Welcome back to Becoming. My name is Nick Slater. Today we're joined by Jeremy Lipkowitz. Jeremy is an executive coach who overcame addiction in his 20s and now helps thousands of men all over the world break free from their addiction to porn. Today we talk about the normalisation of porn in society, how it's conditioned our beliefs around intimacy, how it can create an emotional divide between partners, and how it affects men and women's performance in the bedroom. We talk about the rise of OnlyFans, if porn is cheating, and how our life changes when we quit. I am so excited for you to listen to this one. Jeremy is a fantastic communicator, and as you'll hear, his advice around quitting isn't just applicable to porn addiction, but also applies to any vice or addiction that you might be grappling with. And I also just noticed many of you haven't yet subscribed. So if you are enjoying these videos, do me a favor, help me keep the lights on and flick me a subscribe. I'll jump out of the way. Please enjoy Jeremy Lipkowitz. Jeremy, everyone seems to be watching porn. It's become very normalized. Surely it can't be that bad, can it?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to answer this question. I mean, there are many things throughout history that people did without thinking it was bad. And then we later realized it actually had some harmful effects on us, some negative consequences. You know, the obvious one that we can look to is smoking cigarettes, but even more subtle things like, you know, high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, margarine. There's so many things that our whole society was on board with. And then later on, we realized had some negative consequences. So I think this argument around porn is just not one that holds a lot of weight to it. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean that it's healthy. And the other thing that I like to stress about porn, you know, and I come from a very secular background. This is not a religious argument against porn. This is not a moralistic argument. This is really about a health and happiness question. But the thing with porn and over consuming porn is that many of the consequences and negative consequences are subtle and long-term. So they're things you might not notice right away. And even when you notice some of these negative health effects, you might not even be able to pin it back to porn unless you're looking very closely. So things that you might feel totally disconnected, like depression, irritability, anxiety, issues in your relationship, issues in the bedroom. There's so many things that you might not realize are actually coming from your porn consumption, but they are. And it's because they build up over a long time and they're very subtle. It's like a drop of water each day, but over time it fills up a very big bucket.
Before we do dive into some of those effects, why do you think porn has become so normalized?
I think one of the reasons it's become so normalized is because it is not talked about openly. You know, it's one of these subjects that is very taboo, very sensitive for a lot of people. And so we sweep it under the rug, we put it in the closet. We don't really talk about it in an open and honest way. If it does get talked about, it's more of a joke between men, kind of locker room talk. But it's become normalized in this sense that, you know, it's just something that's very sensitive for some people. And so we don't talk about it. And in the darkness, it's been allowed to grow. And I think that's one of the ways. And also the fact that we're just very sexual creatures. I mean, as humans, we are sexual beings, and it's a beautiful part of who we are. And it's hard to know where that line is between unhealthy sexuality and healthy sexuality. You know, what is a healthy expression of our natural sexual nature, and what has gone into an unhealthy, maybe toxic kind of behavior.
With the rise of the internet, and because we don't talk about it, those things combined, it sort of just became this really prevalent part of society before anyone really had time to react with legislation or any social norms around it.
Yeah, well, not only there hasn't been enough time to really react, it's also a very big industry. You know, so there's a lot of money behind keeping it in business. One of the surprising statistics that many people don't know is that the porn industry makes more money than all of the major sports leagues combined. You know, the NFL, the NBA, the MLB. The porn industry is a bigger industry than all of those combined, which is just wild to think about, that there's actually a lot of money and business interest behind keeping this thing growing. And so I think that, in conjunction with the fact that it is a taboo topic that we don't talk about, has allowed it to grow in such a way. And then you pile on top of that the fact that we are hyper connected. High-speed internet is in everyone's pocket. Every young 11 or 12-year-old boy has access to Pornhub and he can go in his room and watch it. I think if I had access to what we have now when I was a kid, I would be totally hooked on it, night and day.
Absolutely.
So there's so many contributing factors to why it's such a big thing today.
Well, when I was a teenager, the best I could get my hands on was like a pornographic picture on a floppy disk, and compared that to the unlimited amounts of porn a teenager can get on a free website these days. It's just crazy, because even as adults, it's hard to control those impulses. So a teenage brain really has no chance. I guess we could start there. Maybe you could talk to what sort of impact porn is having on young boys or teenagers.
Yeah. There's a few different lenses that we could look at it. We could look at it on a purely physiological basis, looking at dopamine and how it affects our dopamine systems. We can also look at it in terms of a relational lens, how it's impacting our views on intimacy, our views on sex, our views on what's appropriate with the people that we're interested in. On a very basic biological level, porn is just a highly dopaminergic substance. So it really presses on that dopamine system. And so much so that it ends up depleting us. We get burnt out. It dysregulates our dopamine system. And this can cause a lot of things, a difficulty paying attention, difficulty focusing. It causes brain fog. Also causes some of these emotional dysregulations like irritability, depression, anxiety, moodiness, all these things that happen when we overstimulate our dopamine system. So that's just on a purely physiological basis. It's also just an energy leak. A lot of men notice this. Particularly, they notice it when they give up porn, how much energy they feel that they never felt before. And it's one of the things that for so many people who've been watching porn since they were 6, 7, 8 years old, you don't even really know what your body is capable of or what you could feel like without it, because you've been swimming in it your whole life. And so many men, they notice once they give it up, they feel stronger, they feel more energized. They just have this power that they didn't have before. So those are some of the physiological benefits. In terms of what it does on a relational level, I think this is where it gets even scarier, what it's doing in terms of our expectations on intimacy. Because porn is such a fantasy. It's created by men, for men, just to stimulate that dopamine system and to keep you hooked. And so it's not a healthy representation of intimacy. There's not a lot of foreplay. There's not a lot of cuddling or sweet talk. It's very violent as well. It's gotten more violent over the years. And so this is teaching lessons to young men who are watching it. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these lessons are very subtle, so you don't pick up on them right away. One example that I like to give is that in porn, you never see a girl turning down sex, right? You never see a girl saying, hey, I'm not in the mood or I'm not interested. You always see the girl being up for it. Even if the man is violent, even if the man is aggressive, the girl always ends up being into it because it's porn. So imagine a young 10-year-old boy watching this for the next 10 years of his life. Every time he's getting the impression, he's getting the message that, oh, if I make an advance on a girl, she's going to be into it. She'll reciprocate, she'll give back. And so these are, again, sending these very subtle messages that impact intimacy over time.
The young boy is just receiving that message that women are an object. And on the women's side, women are taught that sex is performative and almost like they just have to perform for the man. Their pleasure's not even relevant.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to dopamine, that ongoing quest for dopamine when people are looking for porn, does that lead them to searching for more and more extreme types of videos?
Yeah, and I don't want to give the impression that this happens for everyone. I'm not saying, that every single person who watches porn is an addict or is going to get into more and more extreme things. But one of the things that happens with substances like this is that we get habituated to it. This is just basic human nature. We get accustomed to things and then they stop giving us that same level of excitement. And so we need something a little bit more exciting. And this is that desensitization that we experience with porn or anything like it, where we end up needing just a little bit more to get that same hit. And this over time, again, if you do it every night, over the course of years, you might not notice on any given night that you've gotten into something more extreme. But over the course of 5 years or 10 years, it can really take you into a more extreme place where you finally wake up one day and realize, am I really into this? Like, is this what I've gotten into? And it might have nothing to do with what you're actually interested in terms of your sexuality. It might just be that you've drifted because you needed that extra little hit of dopamine.
It's like being extremized on social media, how easy it is to fall down the rabbit hole by getting served more and more extreme content. That same thing applies for porn, where that algorithm is prioritizing videos that are getting clicked on, which are probably the more extreme ones, and it's easy to see how someone can go down that rabbit hole as well. I'd love to talk about how porn sets an unrealistic expectation. We touched on it with how women have to be performative and men get a really wrong idea about what sex is. But again, porn doesn't portray the emotional connection between a man and a woman. And how prevalent is that link with some of the clients that you have, that they're not really appreciating the emotional connection of sex?
Yeah. It's one of the studies that I heard about one time was that when we are watching porn, the regions of the brain that are lighting up are the regions of the brain associated with viewing objects, not the regions of the brain associated with viewing people and understanding emotions. So like we have certain regions of the brain for looking at a stapler, a table, an object. And when we're engaged in online pornography, those are the regions of the brains that are lighting up. And so on a very neurological level, like objectification is actually happening. We are consuming porn as if it's an object that we need to acquire. And so that objectification then has consequences in our real life. When we then go and meet a partner, our brain has been rewired in a certain sense to view women or, whatever. I'll be speaking from a heteronormative perspective, but it doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, whatever, to view that object of your interest as an object rather than as a person with emotions.
That's really
And it's just, it's like balancing the scale thing. If every night for 5 years you watch porn and then you have one night, where you're with a real human being, there's just so much more on the other side of the scale that it's hard to counterbalance that.
You can imagine the impact on that experience for both partners as well. And, you hear reports of a lot of men not being able to not being able to finish because they've been desensitized through porn. Is that another common thing?
100%. I mean, it's why we also see erectile dysfunction, or sometimes it's called PIED, which is porn-induced erectile dysfunction. When you get habituated to such a high level of extreme pornography, that then when you try to have a normal sexual experience, which is messy, there's sweat, there's, farts sometimes, there's like, complicated stuff that happens in a real physical interaction. It's such an alien experience for some of these men because they have habituated their mind, they have rewired their mind to expect what they've done for the past 10, 15, 20 years, which is consuming porn through a screen. The other thing it does is, again, we are telling our brain that sex is not something that we engage in a physical way. It's something we observe through the eyes. Rather than being present with our partner. This is one of the common things I hear from the partners of men with porn addiction, is that when they're having sex, it feels like their partner's totally absent. They're just in their head, their eyes are closed, they're not even present with their partner. And this is because oftentimes when a partner, when someone who is addicted to porn sleeps with their partner, they just need to go into their fantasy world and imagine that they're watching porn. So it's a totally disconnected experience. And this is one of the other ways it can really harm intimacy.
Another way I imagine is when a male's source of sexual gratification is elsewhere, not only does it impact intimacy, I imagine around the house, it would just impact the energy levels between the couple because he's not but he's not looking at her for sexual gratification or at least for intimacy. So surely they would lose that magnetic pull.
Definitely. There becomes like an energetic blockage between the two in terms of that that polarity, that intimacy, that desire and connection. When a man is giving most of his sexual energy into porn and into a screen, his partner can feel that. There's a lack of connection there. And it's very devastating. And I think the biggest devastation around porn addiction is actually the ways that it betrays the trust in a relationship. Because what often happens is a man will end up hiding his behavior or lying about it or keeping it secret. And then that ends up causing that rift in the relationship where you lose the trust because there's no more communication, there's no more connection, there's no more trust. And that is one of the most harmful things. I speak with many women who have partners with porn addiction, and they often say that the most hurtful thing is not that he watched porn, but that he lied about it and hid it and betrayed the trust.
In a sense.
And that's one of the ways. Yeah.
If there are secrets, in a sense, that is cheating, right?
Yeah. I mean, it gets to this question of, is porn cheating? Right? And it's a great question. And the answer is, it depends. Depends on the couple. I know there are some women who don't mind if their partner watches porn, as long as they're open about it. Maybe they watch it together. And there are some women who are really not okay with it, where it really does feel like the partner is cheating. And so I'm agnostic on this. I don't come down one way or the other. I say have a conversation with your partner and find out how they feel about it. Because there's so many studies showing the effects of porn on relationships and what it does to your partner's sense of self-confidence, how they feel about their own body. Did they become more insecure? There's so many effects of it. And so just having a conversation and getting on the same page is really important.
What we were just talking about, where there's no energetic blockage between the two partners, is subtle at first, but it really does bring you closer together. It builds a charge over the week. You just build this charge within yourself and you start really becoming attracted to your woman, and it's just so good for your relationship. I'm a massive advocate for that. Let's talk OnlyFans. And I guess the difference between OnlyFans and traditional porn is that there becomes this parasocial relationship between some male subscribers and the online creators, where they form a one-sided personal relationship with them. Can you please talk about how problematic that can be?
Yeah, well, first I will just kind of point out that, which many men either don't know or they're willfully in denial about. 99% of the time when you're chatting with somebody on OnlyFans, you're not chatting with the person. You're chatting with a call center in the Philippines or a call center, somewhere where they've outsourced the chat to people who know how to seduce you and make you pay for these videos. I know this firsthand from living in Bali. There's many OnlyFans people there, and I talk with many of them, and they say, yeah, this is a business. We outsource it. There's a call center that works 24/7. They know how to manipulate you and get you to pay for these videos. And so for those people who think, hey, this is a healthier form of pornography because I'm actually having a connection with this person, in some ways, you're just living in denial. I mean, there is no real connection there. It's the illusion of a connection. So I think that's important to understand, just, what really is going on behind the scenes. And also, it's something that you're paying money for. Again, you might be channeling that sexual energy that you could be giving to your partner. Or if you're single, you could be giving to going out and meeting someone. And instead, you're channeling it into a service.
Yeah, we have a limited amount of sexual energy, and it's important to harness that and cherish that. I'm always fascinated, after having Victoria on, who I know that you know as well, who is speaking out against the dangers of OnlyFans. It just fascinates me how mainstream media seems to almost glorify OnlyFans in a way. You'll often see articles in the Daily Mail here about some OnlyFans creator and how much money she's spending, or boasting about how many people she's slept with. What kind of role is the media playing in over-sexualizing and glorifying OnlyFans?
I think it started way before OnlyFans. I mean, what Instagram and TikTok are today, in many ways, it's still on that spectrum of glorifying, sexualizing young girls. And you see it on Instagram. There's so many thirst traps on Instagram, or people who are kind of funneling you in that direction. And our society really has glorified sexuality because sex sells. It taps directly into our human nature, into our physiology as sexual beings, and it gets us hooked and gets us addicted. And OnlyFans is, in some ways, it's just the latest iteration of this movement of hypersexualization and glorifying it. And I want to be clear, I'm a very liberal person. I grew up in a liberal family. I'm not a religious person. I am sex positive. I think kinks are great and sex is great, and I think you should embrace it. And at the same time, I think it's about having a healthy balance. And because what I see is people go too far to either extreme. They either go too far into the suppression and repression of sexuality and say anything, is of the devil and this is a sin, and it's like too far in the repression side. Or sometimes there's too far on the other side where it's like, hey, any kind of sexual expression is good and healthy. And any question about whether it might be unhealthy is wrong, and you're shaming sexuality. And it's just not true. It's like we have to have a healthy balance and understand that we have a physiology that can be hijacked. And we need to be really mindful and conscientious about, what we might be getting taken advantage of, by not being aware of what's happening.
In terms of your clients, what sort of addictions are they facing? Is it porn in general, or are you finding some are struggling with OnlyFans?
It's a huge spectrum, and it can go anywhere from just a porn addiction, really getting into porn. It can grow to things like OnlyFans or subscription sites. It can move beyond porn and subscription sites. It can go to things like escorts, getting into prostitution. It can get into infidelity. So there's so many different ways that it can go. It really just depends on the person. I will also say it's such a spectrum because for some people, the addiction is, it might not be that they're getting into anything unethical or illegal in terms of the content. It might just be that it's really taking away their time and energy from their relationship. And it might just be a little bit here and there, but it might actually be having a significant impact on their relationship or their career. So I like to say that because it's important to understand that every person is different, and you don't have to be the worst case to decide to give it up. You can say like, hey, this isn't really destroying my life, but this is actually holding me back from the kind of next level growth and happiness that I really desire. The real connection, the real intimacy with my partner, that's what I really, truly desire. And this porn habit, even though it's not destroying my life and sending me to jail, it might actually be holding me back from that. And that's why I want to quit it.
That's such a great point, because many people might be listening to this and thinking, yeah, I watch porn, but it's not a huge problem. That's such a great way to identify the line between casual watching and whether it is impacting your life.
And I really want to challenge anyone who's listening who has that thought, which is, yeah, I watch porn, but it's not really a problem. I just watch sometimes and it's not a big deal. If you really think that's true, try stopping for 30 days. And you'll learn many things. One, if you can't stop, if you try to stop for 30 days and you can't, there might be a sign that there's kind of a compulsive nature there. And it's something that actually isn't within your control. And then if you do stop, you might notice things that you've never noticed before, because it might be that in your entire adult life, you've actually never gone without porn for more than 30 days. And so giving yourself a chance to see what your life is like without it is really powerful.
Do you offer any tips for clients who are looking for something to replace porn with if they're trying to break that habit?
It's a very interesting question, which is once you get to the place where you say, okay, I actually want to try giving this up and I want to break free from this habit, how do I go about doing that? And there's a lot that's involved. It's if it's at the place where it's an addiction for you, if it's a really compulsive behavior and it's an unwanted behavior and you find yourself keep going back to it even though you don't want to, then you really have to start to work with what's going on inside of you. Because addiction comes as a result of living an unfulfilling life, not getting your needs met. It's a coping mechanism for self-soothing and for self-medicating. And so you really have to start to develop some alternative coping mechanisms, some healthier coping mechanisms, and start to address the question of why do you have this habit in the first place? What trauma happened to you when you were younger? What needs weren't being met when you were a child or a teenager? What were the things that you were using this for to self-soothe and to medicate? And understanding what your triggers are, if it's loneliness or if it's stress at work or if it's boredom, and those are your triggers, then identifying those behaviors and saying, or identifying those triggers and saying, hey, I need to be more mindful of these so that when the time comes, I have healthier outlets, healthier coping mechanisms. And there's a lot of things, that support this. Exercise, good sleep, community, sports, having fun, meditation, therapy. There's a whole gigantic toolbox of things you can use to support you.
What is the number one way quitting porn will improve your relationship?
I would say that the primary way is the way that it affects the relationship you have with yourself, which then has a ripple effect on all the relationships around you. For example, if you are watching things that are out of integrity, if you're watching things that are not in alignment with how you want to show up as a man in the world, things that are violent or cruel or, just out of integrity in some way, then starting to live with integrity and saying, hey, I'm no longer going to engage with this thing that I know I shouldn't be engaging with. It gives you that sense of self-respect and integrity that then allows you to be in relationship with other people in a healthier way. Because when you're out of integrity with yourself, it's very hard to have a healthy relationship with others. You're going to be constantly second guessing their love and affection. How can this person love me? I feel, broken. I'm out of integrity. So that's one of the primary ways that has the ripple effects outward. It's just the way that it heals the relationship with yourself. The other ways, it helps you be more present for your relationships. Like instead of thinking about porn, thinking about when you're going to act out, judging yourself or judging your partner, you can really be present and just there for them rather than comparing them to some porn scene you just watched or having your mind be elsewhere. You're really present for the relationship. So those are some of the primary ways that it can really impact. And then one of the other things is that when men make this decision to quit watching porn, at least in my program and in many other programs, you need to commit to honesty, to really being truthful about everything. And that also contributes to that integrity where you're no longer hiding or lying. And that improves relationships like no other.
Beautifully said. On a personal level, you mentioned it before in terms of someone raising their energy level by stopping watching porn. If a client does have success in that, what's the first thing they report back to you? How do they feel?
Mental clarity is probably one of the first things that come, and people say it all the time. They're like, wow, I just feel so much more clear-headed. Like I can think straight. This term brain fog is one that's commonly reported with people who are watching too much porn, where it's just your mind feels kind of foggy and dull, and it's your whole nervous system. Your body feels like you're walking in a fog. And when you quit, you just have this sense of clarity and lightness and alertness and confidence. And it's such a beautiful thing to experience. And so that's one of the first things that people notice. There's also a fire that gets built up. As you said before, is sexual energy. It's an energy within our body. And when you stop giving it away and leaking it out to porn, you actually retain that energy within you, which then you can put into your relationship. You can put into the gym, you can put into your business and your career, all sorts of things. And so just that energy starts to come back to your body.
And just being aware of that energy surplus. You don't need to spend it every day. Go to sleep and carry it over into the next day and let it fuel your business.
Yeah. The one other thing I'll say, which for me is like my favorite part of recovery, is that people experience, this is a bit further down the road, but you also kind of notice it right away, which is something that I call the bliss of blamelessness. And this is an idea that comes from Buddhist philosophy, but it's this feeling that when you're living in an ethical way, when you're living in integrity, you experience this thing called the bliss of blamelessness, which is when you know you're not doing anything wrong, you're not causing harm, you're not living unethically. There is a deep bliss associated with that kind of integrity. You can walk down the street with your head held high. You have nothing to hide from anyone. You can hand your phone over to a stranger and not worry about if you left a browser open and are they going to see this thing that I was looking at. There's this sense of the bliss of blamelessness. It's just this feeling that, hey, I have nothing to hide. I'm living a good life. I'm a good person. And that is priceless. Like there is nothing more powerful than that feeling.
That's beautiful. Have you also found that process really kickstart a new journey of self-improvement for your clients where they go on to do other things?
1,000%. It is often the doorway to a more spiritual life in whatever way that means for each person. You know, and I feel this for myself. My own porn addiction was the doorway that got me into Buddhist philosophy and connecting with deeper fulfillment and happiness and, you know, things that really matter in life. And so for so many of these men, this is just the doorway. It's the first doorway and it's the first step towards a path of cultivating a more fulfilling life, a life of service, a life of meaning and purpose. Because that's what porn addiction really is. It makes us feel stuck in this life that feels empty and pointless. It's just this selfish pursuit of more sense pleasure that lasts a millisecond. And as soon as you're done, you feel empty inside. Like, what am I doing with my life? I'm just chasing this pleasure that never feels satisfying. Yeah. And when you can start to recognize that and give that up, it's like, oh, now I have an opportunity to live with purpose, to connect with things that are actually fulfilling.
Empowering to know that you can make changes as well. And talking about that shame, we have all experienced at one point the post-nut clarity where you close your laptop in disgust of what you've just watched. What advice do you have around that? Is there some way we can harness that to improve?
Yeah, that post-nut clarity where you close the laptop, you know, and you kind of wake up to your life. I had so many moments of this where, you know, you finish, close the laptop, and then you're in a pool of your own sweat, just kind of like, what have I done for the last hour or 2 hours? How to harness that? Definitely. It's like rock bottom. Any kind of rock bottom. There is no real rock bottom. You can always go deeper in rock bottom, but every rock bottom is a moment where you wake up in some sense to your life and say, is this really the life I'm living? Like, I can't believe this is what I'm doing with my life. And that is a great platform for jumping off of and climbing out of the hole, right? And so using that pain and that recognition, which is very painful because you know that you've done it to yourself. You know that you are the one who's caused that suffering in your life. And using that pain to say, I'm so sick and tired of my own behavior. I'm so sick and tired of my own self-sabotage. And I'm ready for something different. And I don't care if it's going to cause me discomfort, if I need to push myself, if I need to challenge myself. I can't keep living this way. That's what happened in my life, and it's what happens in the lives of so many people who struggle with addiction and start the path of recovery, is that moment of saying, I'm tired of living like this. This isn't who I am. This isn't who I'm meant to be. So definitely that is the most powerful thing you can harness.
Was it as simple for you as just stop watching? It sounds like you got to a point where you had that realization you needed to stop. Was it as simple as quitting cold turkey?
Not at all. That's the thing that is the least effective. Just stopping, just quitting. You have to start to work with what's going on inside of you. You have to start to work with the mind and understand that it's not even about the substance or the behavior. It's about the dynamics of craving in the mind, the dynamics of seeking an escape, of running away from pain and running towards pleasure, running away from pain and running towards oblivion. And you have to start to work with the internal dynamics of the mind that doesn't want to have any kind of unpleasant experience. Because that's what addiction is. It's running away from anything unpleasant and chasing after, grasping after things that are pleasant. And so in order to really recover, you have to learn some of these really important skills, mental qualities of learning how to be with discomfort without running away from it, learning how to be with pleasure without grasping onto it. And so these are some of the key tools that I had to learn for my own recovery. Is in Buddhist philosophy, it's called equanimity, which is this ability to actually be grounded and be stable with what's happening without running away from what's unpleasant or chasing after what's pleasant. Just that grounded stability of mind is really important to cultivate. And then there's many other layers on top of that in terms of recovery, like having accountability, being in community, letting go of shame. I mean, there's so many things that are important.
Yeah, I loved what you said about how addiction at the root cause is quite similar. So a lot of this transfers to what you might be struggling with.
Definitely. It's really all the same. It doesn't matter. It's something I really try to stress. It doesn't matter if it's porn or video games or social media or exercise or validation. And this is what I talked about earlier. It's the internal dynamics of craving, right? Like wanting something and just being hooked on that good feeling and using that as a way to self-medicate. And the way that we all do that with whatever it is. Everyone's got that kind of behavior. And we just have it to different degrees and to different substances or behaviors. So it really isn't about porn at all. It's about, just that way that we kind of run away from pain and don't want to sit with our emotions.
Yeah, I often find sometimes I even run away from good feelings as well, positive feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I'll find myself after a great podcast, I'll run and jump on the PlayStation or something just to kind of disassociate. It's really bizarre, but I've noticed it recently.
Interesting. Yeah. That's something to dive into.
Yeah, like we whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, sometimes they're uncomfortable. It sounds like maybe meditation or journaling would be helpful for sitting with that and overcoming those feelings of discomfort.
That's entirely what meditation is. I mean, meditation is the training your mind to have the capacity to do some of these things. So meditation is an umbrella term, and there's many kinds of meditations. There's loving kindness meditations, compassion meditations, concentration-based meditations. And then there's mindfulness meditation, which is a very common term these days. But what mindfulness really is that capacity to be with what's happening, to be aware of things that are happening in the present moment in this non-judgmental and curious kind of way. So if there's some pain in your body or in your mind, if there's pain in the body, can be knee pain, back pain. Pain in the mind could be loneliness, anxiety, despair. Can you actually be with those experiences and actually make space for those experiences without trying to run away from them? Because that's what we often do in our life, is we experience some difficult emotion and then we try to run away from it.
That's right. And when you sit in it, you realize that it's not so scary after all, and you can handle it.
Yeah.
So you're an online coach. How does that typically look with your clients? Will they see you for one-off sessions, or is it a more ongoing thing?
It's an ongoing thing. It's a relationship. Yeah. Because changing some of these habits that for many men started when they were 7, 8, 9 years old, it takes time. And it takes consistent work. It takes showing up. It takes accountability. Accountability is one of the most important things for recovery. So many men make the mistake of trying to break free on their own, but they don't get any support. And the problem with that is that recovery is very easy when you're motivated, when you're full of, this motivation, and you say, okay, I'm finally going to quit. I'm going to change my life. It's very easy to do that in the beginning. But the moment that your motivation starts to wane or you have a bad day, it's very easy to slip up. And if you don't have anyone holding you accountable, it's very hard to stay on the path. And so that's why having a men's group, having a recovery group, having a coach or a therapist can be very helpful for staying on track even when it gets difficult.
I'm learning the power of accountability at the moment with a personal trainer. I haven't used one before. But as someone with people-pleasing tendencies, it's really helpful to have someone in your corner. Because if you're on the fence about doing a workout, knowing that he's going to go through it later, I'm definitely showing up. I'm going to do a PB. I need to impress him. Well, Jeremy,
it's using the kind of the power of people pleasing and our psychology to our benefit.
Is there a facility where your clients can meet other clients?
Yeah. So in my program, we have a private community where people can connect with each other. We have like a weekly live coaching call where people get together, because being in community is really important. But aside from that, meeting people in person is also really powerful. So finding a men's group in your area can be really supportive.
Yeah, the power of a men's group is worth mentioning as well. Besides talking about addiction, have you found men finding value in connecting with other men as well?
Definitely. I mean, it's something we really need, and we've lost a lot of that in our modern society, which has become, it's very secular, very independent, very lone wolf kind of, I can do this on my own. And we've lost some of these ways to connect with men in a genuine and vulnerable way, not in a kind of bro-y locker room talk way, but in a way where we can be real with each other and talk about what we're struggling with and be held to a higher standard by our elders, and also supported by people and say, hey, you've got this, you can do this, and I know you can do better.
Very powerful, man. I just want to acknowledge you for the beautiful work you're doing. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I would say get in touch with me through my podcast, the Unhooked podcast. You can find it anywhere. That's the best way to start listening to all the stuff I talk about with porn addiction and really any addiction, because it's not just porn. It's whatever you're struggling with in life. It's all the same at the root level. You can find me on Instagram at Jeremy Lipkowitz, or just go to my website, jeremylipkowitz.com.
I'm definitely tuning in for no other reason but to just hear your dulcet tones. Very soothing voice. Jeremy, thank you for coming on the podcast. I look forward to connecting again.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers, man.